Ukrainian ground forces made a surprise attack across the border. Up to now, this sort of precise targeting would have been very difficult and easily countered by jamming the drone's GPS signal. But the war in Ukraine is rapidly accelerating drone technology. Artificial intelligence, AI, is about to revolutionize how UAVs operate, with the aircraft themselves seeing the battlefield below, navigating their own route, and even visually acquiring particular targets.
In the last few years, warfare has fundamentally changed. The introduction of drones has meant that the modern battlefield is more dangerous than ever, and the chance of detection is higher. This video isn't going to be about what to do once you've been found, but how not to get found in the first place, and the difference between your normal operations and how small changes to those operations can mitigate the chance of being caught by a drone scanning wide areas. This video is going to cover practical SOPs that you and your team can implement if you know or believe that there are drones in the air. So where did this knowledge come from? Well, it came from people who are actively operating against this drone threat right now, many people on a professional level, including manuals from all over the world. Myself included, I have not personally dealt with drones in a combat zone, so see me as a translator of this information in this video that you're being presented with today. We've taken a lot of information, compiled it into one video for you guys to learn about all this stuff. At the end of the day, this threat is here to stay. We still need to get out, train, and operate. So with that, let's get into how to counter thermal drones. So today, to help film this video, we've got my mate who brought some awesome drones. These are the most common ones that you're going to see in civilian use and even in use in modern conflicts today. This one here is a Mavic 3T, it's thermal capable, and we have the Mavic Mini 3 also. So let's get into the specs of them both, their pros and their cons. And guys, when it comes to this stuff, the better you understand the system hunting you or looking for you, the better you can understand its capabilities and how to counter them. So let's start talking about this guy here. This is the main one we're going to be using today, and this is the Mavic 3T made by DJI. This one has seen a lot of combat use in the current conflicts. So what are its pros and its cons and its specs? Well, it's about an $8,000 drone. It's a quadcopter, meaning it has the 4 propeller blades, and it also comes with a separate controller. Camera-wise, it's got a very good resolution thermal camera and standard imaging camera as well. In terms of speed, this thing can get up to a max speed of around about 45 to 50 miles an hour. Battery life though is only around about 35 to 40 minutes, but the more features you use on this, the hotter the battery gets, the less that battery is going to be, so definitely a limiting factor. In terms of a crosswind, if it's a windy day, you can deal with around about 25 knots of wind. As well as this, it's limited by flying in the rain and weather. So if it's raining outside, the weather's bad and high winds, your chances of encountering drones are going to be a lot less, as the Mavic 3 can't deal with that. Now bigger drones, that may change. But all drones, their biggest limiting factor is going to be the heat. These motors get very, very hot. In fact, if they're carrying a payload, they're going to heat up more, the battery life is going to be less. So if these are patrolling up high and looking for you, the chances are that they're going to be low on battery life. So you may only need to evade them for a certain amount of time. So with this drone, the range is around about anywhere from 6 to 8 kilometers. Now that's going to depend on a lot of things, the battery life, the terrain, the atmospheric conditions. But the fact is, with both these drones, if you're seeing them and encountering them, the chances are is that you're very close, if not in a hostile environment. Now I want to bring your attention to the controller here. So the controller on these guys can do a lot of things. Two of the best features is you can do tracking, meaning that you can actually attack a subject or pin it, and the drone will actually follow and track it. So one of the other features that this drone has is waypoint missions, meaning that we can actively plot waypoints on a map in this device and the drone will fly to them. Think of this almost like an autopilot. Now again, that's fantastic for area reconnaissance and surveillance, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. But remember, when these have payloads and are doing an active mission, you're either very close to the enemy or the battery life is going to be very low. And again, if the weather's bad, that's the biggest Achilles heel of these drones. So now let's come over to the Mini 3. Now the Mini 3 is almost a smaller version of this. The Mini 3 has no thermal capability, and you also have to pair it with a cell phone. The Mini 3 is very popular with social media because the camera is basically a glorified phone camera. There is no thermal capability. With that said, we also have the short range, the risk of overheating motors, and a short battery life of around about 20 to 25 minutes. Although it doesn't have the thermal, it is very good for either delivering a payload at short range or doing very small area reconnaissance. Now the cost of entry for this guy is going to be about $1,000 US. So this is a great option if you want to keep it in a patrol backpack or within a team, whereas this one is a far bigger investment, but again the capability difference is huge. So knowing what these drones are capable of, what's out there, is again going to help us counter them. So that's a quick breakdown on the drones. Today we're mostly going to be using this guy with the thermal capability. So with that, let's get our kit on, patrol, and get into it. So you're in enemy territory. The first thing we're going to do is simply demonstrate the difference between walking around, patrolling without a care, and the difference that simply getting into cover or using the terrain to our advantage can be. The first thing that we're going to do is walk on a road. Now it's very tempting, we're tired, we're trying to get somewhere quickly, we're going to want to utilize roads. But for this shot, we're going to have the thermal drone doing a scanning wide view and show you how easy it is to get spotted if you're simply patrolling on a road. And then we're going to show you footage of that same procedure, but done with a little bit of mitigation and care. So that was simply patrolling on a road without a care. Now I'm going to patrol into the road and use that brush to my advantage. And we're going to show you guys the difference that makes in how hard it is for the drone to find us. Remember, oftentimes roads may have a canopy. Use that canopy to your advantage. All right, so what you just saw was the difference between on a road and then in the brush. And you could see as soon as I got into that canopy layer, it absolutely changed for the drone. He couldn't see me, so use that canopy to your advantage. Do not patrol on roads. But if you have to, note how I dash to cover quickly. Use that cover, use that brush. A drone is not going to go in there. Use that to your advantage. Now remember, in this video, we're doing a lot of very wide shots. The idea is that you're patrolling, there's a drone up in the area, maybe looking for your patrol. So a lot of what we're doing is very wide, and I want you to actually concentrate on what I look like and how hard it is to find me. So a lot of the shots that we're doing today, again, is a drone operator looking over a wide area. He might not know that your unit is there, so he's just casually scanning, which is why a lot of our footage is wide area view. And realistically, this is how drones are going to be used. So remember, we're showing the contrast between casually patrolling and walking into an area and doing small things such as using the shade, the heat, and cover to mitigate that drone threat. So now you've seen some examples of patrolling, using cover. Let's talk about things that we can do on our actual body. Now, we spoke in our camouflage video about standoff distance, and those principles still apply here. What is standoff distance? Well, that's simply the distance between your body heat or the object making heat and the camouflage itself. The key to this thermal camouflage is we want to match the temperature of our environment. Now, the best way to do this is to have camouflage on us, but the problem is over time this heats up as our body heat irradiates onto the camouflage itself. So to mitigate this, we want standoff distance. So if my body is creating heat, I can have my camouflage just off my body. How do I accomplish this? Well, I can use brambles, I can use brushes, things that stay off my body. Cam netting is another good source also, but this can cause yourself to overheat. So use it with care. One technique we're going to show you here is the poncho. Now, if you have Gore-Tex or a poncho, we can actually use our water bottles and water to wet that object and put it over our body. This is going to take the ambient air temperature and reflect that over our own body heat. And this is a very common method. So what we're going to do is we're going to show myself patrolling. You've seen it without this camouflage method. I'm going to go ahead, get my poncho out my pack, demonstrate that, get it wet, put it on myself, go out and patrol, and let's see the difference that that makes on an open road and in cover. So now I've got my poncho out, what I'm going to do is put this over my body. Now, the bad thing about the poncho is it does hinder you from getting your equipment, but again, we're going to see the camouflage value of this. So what I like to do is lay out the poncho, get water, and we're just going to wet that poncho. With the water in the middle, I like to just soak the outside of that poncho. Again, the side that's touching me is going to be on the outside there, getting it all around my head and my shoulders, which are going to create the most heat and where my body contact's going to be. Just moving that water inside that tarp around. All right, let's put this on and start patrolling. So there we have it, the wet poncho's on. It is uncomfortable, it is nasty, but that's keeping my body heat away. So let's see how this looks under thermal. So there you have it. That is the wet poncho method. Now, as you can see, when I was patrolling on the road, the temperature of my body was cooler than the hot road. So in that case, it wasn't very good. But the second that you guys saw that footage in the brush, you could see the difference of my body temperature matching my ambient environment. So that's really the takeaway from this is if you want to get cold, that's the best way to do it. And oftentimes our body is colder than our environment. But in the rare cases where a road or rocks might retain heat, maybe using that method isn't the best option. All right guys, so as you can see right now, we're patrolling through the brush with that wet poncho. Now we're gonna put in lots of different footage of myself here, but the biggest takeaway is it's a lot harder to find me. In fact, you can only see a speck of that thermal. And again, if you're patrolling and you're trying not to be found, if someone doesn't know that you're there, this is a great option. Our drone operator pointed out a few things, and the most important is movement. It wasn't so necessarily my body temperature giving me away, but it was when I was moving. So just like our basics in camouflage, move slow and methodically. Use the wet poncho method to match the temperature of your environment while also utilizing cover. So now let's talk about vehicles. Now vehicles are very hard to hide because that engine radiates a lot of heat, anywhere from 3 to 5, even 600 degrees or up to 800 at the exhaust. In fact, a thermal signature can remain on the ground even once that vehicle is moved. So when it comes to camouflaging vehicles, our standoff distance is going to be hugely important. We're going to demonstrate here the difference of a heat mark left by a vehicle, but a very simple method using our, again, wet poncho. We're going to put it over, we're going to open the hood and we're going to put that poncho over. If you have time, cut down trees and put those over and around the vehicle. You want to face the vehicle into the wind direction also. This is going to help with airflow, getting all that hot air out. It's not a foolproof method, but it's another way that you can hide those vehicles. So as you can see right now, we've got the vehicle, it's moving out of place and you can see that thermal mark. Now we're going to take that engine, we're going to open up the hood, and then we're going to place that poncho on top, and you're going to see the difference here. So once you've parked your vehicles, you're going to get a poncho, you're going to wet it, that's going to help cool down the engine. You want the airflow coming into the engine. Now remember, all these techniques are used together. You don't want anything being used on its own. So you're going to have a canopy over your vehicles as well. You're going to park them as much into cover as you can. But using these methods, again, is to help cool it down. You'll see in the thermal footage, it very quickly breaks up the outline of that engine. Use 2 or 3 of these and you can break up the outline of the vehicle combined with a canopy. Vehicles are a losing battle, but it's one that we can at least help mitigate. So now let's talk about your campsite and decoys. You've seen patrolling, you've seen vehicles, you've seen individual things you can do to mitigate the thermal threat. But at the end of the day, we've got to camp, we've got to rest. Cooking and camping creates a lot of heat. The reason is we're stationary for a long amount of time. While we sleep, our body temperature also is able to rise and just create that concentration of heat. So if you're in the camp, a few things we can do is first off, use that standoff distance. Not only use shelters, but sleep within a bivy bag and have a nice open shelter. What this will allow is that cooling effect to happen again. Point your shelters into the wind best you can. Whoever's on watch can consistently use water and cool off all those shelters to again help mitigate that thermal threat. The next thing we can do while in camp is create a decoy. Consider filling a hole or a tarp, make it look like a human. We can use hot rocks if you start a underground fire as well. Or we can use heating packs from MREs to create a lot of heat. You can put that a few hundred meters away from your camp. What this means is that if drones are searching in the area, the drone operator is going to focus on that rather than your well-camouflaged camp. Again, guys, this isn't a losing battle, but we can mitigate the threat. If the threat is out there, the idea is not to have it look at you, so have it look at something else. So right now what we're going to film is a cooking stove, a gas stove in particular, which gets very hot. We're going to show you guys what that looks like under thermal, and then we're going to do a few little mitigation techniques to try to hide that heat best that we can. Right, so what we've done is we've set up a small example of a camp, a very short-term thermal shelter camouflage with good cooling, and we got the stove going just like a light patrol camp. We're out here in the open to demonstrate this, guys, but we're going to show you what the stove looks like from the air under thermal, and then we're going to move that same stove under our shelter. We're going to see that difference from the drone. So let's take a look now. So as you guys can see, that gets very hot and is very obvious. It's a cold day today, so we're getting a lot of contrast. But what we can do to mitigate this is we can obviously put our shelter over it. We can also cook in a hole as well. Again, using that canopy is going to be key. Standoff distance is really the key to mitigating thermal. Alright guys, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to get water, and now I'm going to pour that over the tarp and watch what happens. That water is going to cool that tarp to the ambient environment. This combined with overhead cover is honestly a foolproof way to sleep safely and cook in a shelter. It's going to require maintenance, but rather than being an obvious area of heat, you see me go into the shelter now, and that's pretty incredible. So you have it, guys. There are some things that you can do to mitigate the thermal threat. Guys, the truth is, this threat is here to stay. We've got to live with it. So the things that you learned in this video, you should really consider incorporating into your SOPs and how you operate in the field. Guys, thank you so much for making it this far. I really hope that you appreciated all the knowledge in this video. Again, it was a collection from so many people all over the world with a massive wealth of experience. This threat is new, we're still learning techniques, so if you guys know anything, please comment below. I want to thank my mate so much. He could not have made this video possible, so please thank him in the comment section below. Guys, so much more exciting things to come. As always, I appreciate your time. And for closing thoughts today, as my Scottish corporal once told me, you need a wee bit of luck, but you've got to make your own luck. All right, guys, thanks so much. We'll see you on the next one.